We're recording.
There you go.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul, I'm going to, now that we've done the welcome, I'm going to hand it off to you to talk a little bit about today's agenda and learning objectives. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, once again, I just want to thank everybody for joining us again this morning. We've been doing these meetings now for roughly, 5-6 months now. And really great topics and great discussion that we've had through all of them. Please, let's keep that moving forward and be sure to get into your chat box. And really what we want to do is see how you're doing. Questions you may have. We do have an objective 4-hour meeting this morning, but anything that's top of mind to you, concerns or like questions and concerns that you're having, we want to make sure that these are value adding. Get your questions answered. Today's topic is something that I can say that really impacts us all, and that is recognizing and dealing with the mental and emotional impacts of the whole pandemic and COVID-19, and it's really made an impact really for all of us. And so that's not just us as people, that's our employees and the teams we are responsible to navigate, as well as our families. There's been a lot of adjustments that have had to be made, and if there was a notch 11, I think we've all had to go there, say the last 6 months, when it comes to re-navigating kind of how we do things. And so today, we're very thankful for our subject matter experts for coming in, and I'm going to have Marilyn Stansbury introduce them. But please get into that chat and let's make this as value add as we can. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Deb, for being back in our moderator chair. And I know all of you, Marilyn Stansbury, and I've been saying to folks the last few weeks that Mondays for me have been hard. I seem to have gotten through COVID. I mean, I feel like if you can say really well, so many things have come together seamlessly for us just to pick up and move on and make the right decision to move things forward. But the last 4 Mondays, I have been really slow to start. And over the weekend, a colleague of mine from another state shared this article, which we will send out to all of you at the end of today's meeting, called Surge Capacity, Why Do We Feel So Awful? And it's really about how in a crisis or in disaster response or disaster recovery situation, when you have to immediately engage in something, you do everything you need to do to pull your resources together, to pull yourself and your people and other things around you together, and you give it your all because you know that whether it's in 24 hours or 24 days or in some period of time, you know there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? You know it's going to sort of come together. And that's not the case in a marathon pandemic. And so physically and emotionally, this article talks about how our bodies have to try to figure out how to regulate where we're going to be today, where we're going to be this week as we emerge into what we have seen happening. And Paul and Deb, you're right. It was March 11th when Paul and I said, what would it take to move 2,100 apprentices to totally online? And Paul, I think, thought that I grew 2 heads and had lost my mind at the same time. And 2 weeks later, he had 2,100 students fully online with instructors trained to be able to deliver that online instruction. So, and then we started these forums and have run the gamut of topics. But this article this weekend really made me start to think about, again, how are we going to continue to power through this, and how are we going to continue to power forward? And that brings me to introducing some of our speakers for today, Bruce Siegel and Kate Huckabay from Kerrigan's Group. They are a global consulting firm that specializes in strategy, that specializes in change management and change behavior. And Kate and one of her other colleagues, for those that are on the board, may remember that they have helped us do 2 of our last 5 strategic planning sessions. They've been present with us at our strategic planning retreat. And they also have some great things to share with us about helping us with that forward-thinking mindset. So we're looking forward to hearing from Bruce and Kate today. Also on the call is Micah Dawson. Good morning, Micah. Micah is an attorney with Fisher and Phillips. We are missing Kristen White today, but Micah is filling in for Kristen, and believe it or not, Micah is absolutely as awesome as Kristen is. So we're going to enjoy hearing from Micah today on top of mind labor and employment issues and other things that may be new to the governor's executive order, things that we need to know to operate our businesses. So with that background, Deb, I'm going to turn it back to you to moderate and get our session going. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. I had this order all figured out, but I think in deference to Micah, I'd like to ask him to go first this morning and talk to us, briefly about anything new happening with the governor's office, executive orders. What do we need to know about the new pay equity law that goes into effect January 1st? We've talked about that a few times. And so, Micah, could you give us a quick update on all things coming out of the state?
No, I can't. I'm happy to. And I actually think that the primary focus will probably be a little bit federal. I know that Kristen has spoken in previous forums, and her and I have presented in previous forums about some of the questions regarding the FFCRA and its implementation. And I spoke with Kristen earlier this week, and she said that she'd been pumping the brakes on giving direct answers to some of your questions until we had more either responses from the DOL, or I think, as you probably spoke about earlier, there was a federal court case in New York that came out against some of the regulations. So in response to that, earlier I guess it was last Friday, the Labor Department set out a second set of rules regarding employer compliance duties with respect to the FFCRA. I think we can assume, without having, I guess, direct evidence of it yet, that our state laws that follow the FFCRA will start to follow these types of interpretive guidelines as well. The big five that I think were the takeaway from these were, one, the definition of workers deemed healthcare providers, which I know won't affect a lot in this group, was narrowed significantly. If anyone has specific questions about that definition, feel free to reach out, but I don't think it applies directly to most of our members. The one issue that they did affirm, though, the Department of Labor affirmed that leave under the FFCRA can only be taken if there's work available to take leave from. So there had been kind of a gray area open question about, well, what if the project ends, or what if we have to furlough these people? If they're on furlough, are they then eligible for the leave because they're still technically current employees? Or in a lot of our industries and a lot of our employers, well, what if the project ends? Do they get, if the project's only 3 weeks and they have, I guess, or the project's only 1 week left and they have 2 weeks of leave, do they get paid the second week even though no one's working? And the Department of Labor came out and affirmed that there has to be work available to take leave from. And I think that's that is a big plus for employers. It allows you to, I guess, kind of look forward a little bit more. It allows you not to, it allows us to use furloughs as I think they were intended. As most of you know, a lot of the issues that have arisen with the unemployment numbers are a result of, in March, when we initially thought, okay, the leaves that we're hearing coming from DC and the federal and the state, if we furlough employees, they're not going to be eligible for the leave. So we can still keep them active, probably pay their health insurance. But then when DC and the state started dancing a little and said, well, they might be, that's when the layoffs happened. And I think that was a sad result of indecision. And now we're starting to get more concrete decisions. So hopefully this allows people to come back into the workforce for specific projects without risking having to put them on leave, extended leave with pay, even if there isn't work available. The third one is if an employee needs intermittent leave, they still have to have employer approval. So an employee can't take on and off leave to take care of a family member or on and off leave to go get medical care without the employer's approval. So essentially they are bringing the FFCRA in line with the FMLA, which I know most of you have dealt with or dealt with some sort of state equivalent at this point. So that's helpful because we can follow our general FMLA paperwork, timelines, the correspondence trail that we always put together. And I think that's helpful to bring those two acts in line with each other. The fourth one is employees must give employers information to support their leave as soon as practicable. I think Kristen spoke about this initially, and her and I have done the presentation on this. There was a big question of, do you have to have paperwork before you take leave? I think what the Department of Labor recognized was it's really hard in the COVID environment to get paperwork about COVID prior to needing leave. If any of you have had to go get tested yet or try to get tested, it takes 2 days to get a test, 4 days to get a result. And so there's a lot of employees were in the dark or in the gray area where I think I need leave. You want me to be quarantined, but I don't have the paperwork yet. And now the new standard, instead of before taking leave, it's as soon as practicable, which is even more of a gray area. That could be anywhere from 2 days into leave when they get those doctor's appointments to 2 weeks from when they return, that they have to provide documentation. This is going to be a case-by-case basis based on the employee and their communication skills, their doctor's communication skills, the environment. I would caution employers to be careful with this issue. If an employee is out for 2 weeks because of COVID and doesn't get you the paperwork until they return, or they come back and they say, you know, I forgot, I'll get it to you in 2 or 3 days. I work with them, talk to your counsel. If it becomes an issue that there's actually a question, take that to counsel, because I'm sure, as Kristen has mentioned, no one wants to be the poster child for one of these lawsuits, whether it's state or federal. No one wants to be the employer with their name first in the post. So just be careful. That's an issue that I think as soon as practical isn't defined. So I would lean towards it protecting the employee more than the employer. So be careful with those issues when people are providing paperwork or the timing. There's a lot of trust that the DOL is assuming employers can give to employees, even as much as I'm sure all of we've seen some of the dancing or taking advantage of. Just be careful with that. It's one that it can easily be rectified in a couple days, and giving someone a couple extra days is better than giving them a free lawsuit. And then the last one is in terms of the information regarding to give notice of family and medical leave. Again, same thing. It's as soon as practicable, allowing them time or the notice to, I guess, bring that after or provide, look, I need to leave for this specific reason. Communicating that is going to be similar to sick leave policies you guys have that we can continue to ask and follow up. But again, it's give leave first and then follow up and continue to get the paperwork after.
Micah, is there a link somewhere to a summary of just like you just gave that we can provide our members?
So Marilyn has a link. We have an alert on our web page that can easily be sent out to membership. And either I can forward that or Marilyn can forward that to the whole system.
And I have, I think that I think Holly already has it for our notes today. So
Perfect.
All good.
Perfect. Okay. All good. That was wow. A lot of things change, and there's a lot of gray, like you said, varying shades of gray, which I think also contributes to what we're talking about in terms of surge capacity as it relates to COVID. And while I know all of the contractors and members on this call understand what an electrical power surge is, it's a good analogy to the surge capacity as it relates to how we're feeling about COVID, and sometimes that's a hard thing to get in touch with. So I've asked Paul to tee us up and set the table briefly with the electrical power surge analogy, and then we'll kind of just pivot off of that. So Paul, you're muted. Okay.
He's working on it.
Yeah.
Oh, he wants us to go on.
Okay, so, you know, basically a power surge is the spike in your electrical current, very brief, usually lasting hardly long at all, 1/1000th of a second, yet it can still cause damage. And it's caused by many things. Lightning strikes are common cause, and they stem from inside a structure, and can really knock everything out in whatever building or home you're in. And so you have to really, to address this, you have to reset, repower, and you reset and unplug electronic devices before resetting your circuit breaker. And if the surge caused a power outage, once you're reset with the circuit breaker, then you can plug your devices back in. And I think that Paul is back, and I did that very quickly, but anything to add?
Oh, no, I mean, I apologize about that, y'all. So I have this really old laptop, and it wrestles with me every time I try and use it. Yeah, power surge, right? So, you know, it can have it happens, you know, this surge happened pretty instantaneously. We had to be on our feet. And the analogy going here is we see this spike in our energy levels. We surged power here in March, and we all know about a power surge. You know, it causes damage, and you have to analyze every area that there is that you know that could be affected by that surge. And I think that, you know, we've all been dealing with that for kind of a nice, like I said, 6 months sustained amount of time, where every single day is a new playlist, right, Marilyn? You never know when you get in or when you start checking your communications in the morning, what's going to be there, you know, and there's scenarios that we have never dealt with before. So there's a lot of different ways we've had to adjust, and they're outside the ways of our norm, you know, and so our work didn't stop. We've added a whole bunch of power to everything that we have to do. And sooner or later, right, that surge, you cannot sustain that. You know what I mean? Sooner or later, you're going to have to reset. Sooner or later, you're going to have to go back and analyze every area that's been affected by the surge, and figure out and navigate a proper way and strategy to fix the problem. You know, you can't just turn the power back on. You have to analyze everything. And so kind of there's really the analogy of the power surge that we've seen. It's people's initiatives, it's people's involvement, it's people's interactions. Every one of our eyes right now has become so accustomed to viewing ourselves on a camera every day, you know, and this was not the case in February of this year. You know, there's a lot of new things that we've had to put into place. And so it's kind of my kind of, I guess you could say, comparison to a power surge, and that is, you know, we've experienced something new in our system, and it has taken us to our max level and beyond. And now that maybe some things are, or if they do lighten up, or who knows what, like I said, that next issue is going to be, you know, how do we readjust? How do we re-navigate? How do we make sure that our systems are safe and in place for progress, right? You want to be as proactive as you can about things, then you can be reactive. And so, yeah, there's kind of my kind of crossover apple to apple on what's going on when it has to do with, say, electricity.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks so much. That's really good. I know that a couple of questions came in as you were just making the comparisons. And I think Leland asked, you know, how many of us have been able to take a vacation this year? Are we able to avoid COVID burnout? I mean, this is a perfect question, Leland, because this is exactly what Bruce and Kate are going to talk to us about. You know, does anyone feel like they've been on a treadmill at a fast pace and feel like they cannot stop this year and have to just make sure you just power through, keep the business going, and get through the year? I think all of that is what you just kind of put into words, what I think many of us are feeling. And so what I'd love to do is ask Bruce and Kate now to talk to us a little bit about surge capacity and their definition of that. So can one of you take that as a first step toward helping us with the real underlying problem that Leland's question represents?
Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Kate Huckabay. I'm a consultant with Carrickens Group, as Marilyn mentioned, and nice to see some of you who I've met at your board retreat meeting to do this strategic planning. Yeah, I think about 2 years ago. So first of all, like that totally resonates for me. I have 2 kids who are in elementary school, and we've been navigating the remote learning stuff. And, you know, this morning I was like, okay, I've got this meeting at 7:30. You guys need to go in the other room and be quiet. You know, like there's all these things that I was not doing in February. So that certainly feels, you know, it's a little overwhelming, certainly. And so I appreciate the surge protector or the surge circuit breaker kind of analogy. And then to transition to the work that we've been doing with our clients. So we've been really wanting to leverage the learnings of the last 6 months and lean into what has worked well for employees, what has worked well for leaders, and then really we want to reimagine what going forward looks like and recognize that this is an opportunity to try something new. This is an unprecedented time, an unprecedented way of working. And so what are the new questions that we can ask? And how can we eliminate all or nothing thinking? And so that's really where we've been focused on our work with our clients. And we're open, like, you know, we don't know either. And so we're open to having those conversations. And I wanted to also just say a lot of our work has been with folks who have office workers primarily, and we understand that there are different needs for people who work in the field. But we are really digging deep on how we can leverage what we've learned the last 6 months and then create a new future going forward. Is there anything else you wanted to add there, Bruce?
Yeah, I think, Deborah, one of the comments you made is a real decision point. Are you going to go back or are you going to move forward? And some of the work that Kate is talking about is in this idea of reimagining the work environment is how do you put a stake in the ground and say, okay, we learned a lot through this remote work that we've been forced to do, and then how do we reimagine work going forward? Part of that is a concept that we like to call intentional optimism. It's really making sure that you understand as an individual in an organization and potentially a leader in an organization, how you show up is infectious with how everyone else may evolve their work day. And negative dispositions will run faster and be stronger than positive dispositions. And so there's a real need to intentionally be optimistic. That doesn't mean that you want to be Pollyanna, and referring back to the article that Marilyn talked about, it's not that you don't recognize the reality of the situation, but looking at it and saying, okay, what's the opportunity within the situation and what, frankly, can I not affect? So being realistic of what can I work with and what don't I have agency over is really important. The other thing I'd like to add is the work we do is really at a behavioral level. And setting behavioral standards in normal times is extremely important, especially for leadership teams. And now it's even more important that there are behavioral standards for leaders and leaders aligning to how they're going to lead. your workforce is looking to you as role models, and how are you dealing with the stress? Vacation's a great example. Vacation should not be optional. Yes, you have to work it into the way your business has to operate now and the stresses around that, but it should not be optional. And that's just one example of role modeling a certain behavior. But these behavioral expectations need to be set, need to be aligned to, and leaders need to hold themselves accountable and their peers accountable to those expectations.
Bruce and Kate, you guys, in one of your papers, your thought leadership papers, and we'll provide you guys on the call, on the Zoom today, with a link to those. They're very, very good. You talk about 6 ways to go forward. I think many of us have been through the surge, but now we're working on another electrical contracting term called load balancing. It has also come to be applied to how we're juggling and managing our business, our labor force, our work, and beyond every single day. So I would love to have you do a little bit of a deep dive into the 6 ways that you think leaders should be setting an example and thinking about going forward, because we don't often have the luxury of doing that in the chaos of the day that often happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. And so we have we call it the Gear Up model. And so I'll sort of give a brief explanation of those different acronyms. So G is give up on going back. And that's exactly what Bruce was just talking about, that there's an opportunity here to just say, okay, we need to adapt and move forward. Let's stop saying, well, when everything goes back to normal, and okay, well, post-COVID. Well, we don't know when post-COVID is going to be. And so wanting to recognize that there's been a lot of benefits as well, that folks are not having to commute the same way that they were, or office workers is what I'm referring to here. There's really been an opportunity for leaders to trust their employees, and because everybody's proven over the last 6 months that they've been able to be productive and get their work done, and that we've all been able to adjust very quickly. And so just really recognizing that you give up on going back. E stands for eliminate all or nothing thinking. And I think there's been mindsets around, well, people need to be in the office to get work done, or if we don't get to all be together in the same room, our culture is going to die, or, as a leader, I can't give people feedback the way that I could through a virtual connection. It needs to be in person. And so really recognizing that that's all or nothing thinking, and being able to be in the messy middle is what we call it. But there's a lot of opportunity in that messy middle, and it's uncomfortable, and I think it will continue to be uncomfortable for a while because it's a new experience, and to lean into that. And then A, again, on the Gear Up, is ask different questions. And so there's been different ways that we can connect. So if people are feeling a loss of a sense of belonging with their colleagues, really ask the new questions about how can we create new connections. Or, I was just mentioning about having my kids in the other room. So how can we bring our personal world, how can we integrate our personal and our professional worlds and feel more comfortable doing that? And being more clear about our time. So like, for example, if I need to go do something with my kids, like I send a message to my colleagues who I'm working with, I'm going to be unavailable from this time, but I'll be back. Like I've gotten much more comfortable being transparent about how I'm spending my time so that I can accommodate the rest of my colleagues. R is rethink the workday. So there's been a real emphasis that, you work from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that's it. And so there's an opportunity here to also recognize that I was just mentioning about my calendar. So I need to readjust my schedule based on my having children at home, and that's okay. It's like, as long as I'm getting my work done and I'm communicating with my colleagues, there's some space that can be taken to help to help everybody feel comfortable with that. And really like fully committing to leading with trust. I think that this has been a big shift for leaders around communicating differently, asking different questions, and trusting their employees in an entirely new way. U is understand the costs and benefits. And so, you know, we recognize that there's costs around, you know, shifts in health and safety requirements, certainly oversight of regulatory requirements for data. So if you work in a financial services institution, and those types of things, and that people needing to up-level their home offices. But the benefits are, you know, access to a more diverse talent pool and broader access to customers and markets, because now folks are much more comfortable meeting on Zoom. And so you don't have to fly to another location to meet with somebody. We can meet this way. And you know, we were talking about just like happier humans. People can get their laundry done and go grocery shopping when it's not peak hours, you know, and do it on the weekend because there's some flexibility there. So there's some real benefits to being in this new work environment. And then finally, P stands for pull in your colleagues. So recognizing that not any one person can design what the future is going to look like, that this is a collective and a collaborative effort for all of us to lean into, to be excited about, be asking those different questions, and that it takes a collective. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of our Gear Up model. And as Deb mentioned, there's a collateral piece that we can share with you all more about that. So yeah, are there any questions anybody has?
Jeff Magee, may I call on you to simply talk a little bit about what Kate just presented in the context of your company and your employees and your life, and how this may or may not make sense to you?
Yeah, one of the things, give up on being back to normal. I like that. Just give up on it, because who knows when this is going to end, and trying to say, all right, guys, in 2 months or something, we're going to be back to normal. Everything's going to be the same. And we just don't know when that's going to happen. So I like that analogy. I'm really going to try and implement that with my team, because, let's look on what are our benefits. And one of the benefits, especially when it started for our guys, is, traffic for getting to the job sites. Our guys are like, man, this is taking me half the time to get to the jobs. So if we can kind of push onto those, what are the better things we're getting out of this? I really like that analogy, though, especially give up on going back to normal.
Yeah. Leland, how about you?
I think this year has been a large collection of turns in the road that were not expected, but we're really kind of faring pretty well. We're weathering the storm. We're looking, and like it was said, I mean, the normal that we had before is no longer a reality. So it's something that's changed our course in how we do things, how we interact with people, how we conduct business, how we take care of our employees, how we hire people, how we interact with our employees. And quite frankly, how we look at, let's say, even in an office setting, the traditional view of an office worker or somebody who works in the office coming Monday through Friday, working an 8-hour day in the office, and, taking a structured approach to it is pretty much changed. And the flexibility and being able to have the flexibility as an employer is probably what's going to help those companies move forward into 2021. Being able to work with the employees. There are many situations that we encounter, especially now with a pandemic, but listening to employees, discussing the issues that they're seeing that may be possibly a performance issue or something that's leading to absenteeism. It may not actually be what we think of normally why an employee would miss work. One of the biggest things that we look at is like COVID burnout. A lot of people don't take vacations. A lot of people feel like they can't take vacations. A lot of people feel like they shouldn't take a vacation, or they're not going to go anywhere because it's not safe. I think that your employees, especially line managers, middle managers, people managers, need to reset, because it's going to impact them. It's going to flow downhill to the employee, down to the individual contributor. And once that happens, then your culture starts to hurt. So I think it's right now we have been, and I think all of us have really been focusing on the people, because the people that we have working for us right now, or working in our companies right now, are what's going to keep us going forward, and we're going to rely on them. And it's giving recognition to the employees, but giving recognition to all the employees is, the employee workforce as a whole has been helpful. A lot of people have mentioned this, sorry, and I'm going on because there's so many things running through my head right now, but a lot of people have said, during this time, it happened in March when everything started to shut down and we started doing this. I felt like it was a dark period, maybe just because of the weather. It was, overcast. It wasn't really sunny. It was springtime coming. It just a dark time, but having leadership of the company or management providing information, providing trusted information to your employees is that guiding light to help them know that they're not alone in this. They're not going to have to go through this pandemic and, feel alone. So supporting our workforce, making sure that we support them, their families, what they have to do, and getting correct information out to the employees in a timely manner would be really valued. So that's what I had.
Thanks, Leland. I really like the gear up model, because what it does is it succinctly puts in a very short form a road, a map that you can follow. And I think I'm hearing from some of you from you, Jeff and Leland, you've already intuitively started doing a lot of this. And I think that that's just good leadership. It's why you're in business. But the gear up model kind of makes me want to go back and think through again, have I done that? How have I given up? Have I eliminated all or nothing thinking? Am I asking the right or different questions, and so on? And I'd like to ask, Jason, are you there? I'd like to ask you to maybe say a few words. You have a especially interesting company culture, and preserving that culture, as Kate talked about, is always, right now, at least, a little bit of a question mark.
Yeah, that's definitely our challenge. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So, we've done some interesting things to maintain connection. We used to meet 4 times a year in person, plus we had 2 overnight offsite retreats. And I think one of our biggest challenges right now is group meetings and maintaining that in-person connection. So one of the things we've done is our leadership team broke into groups of 2, and we went and visited every one of our field crews in person, because you could do a socially distanced 6-person meeting, when you couldn't do a 100-person meeting. And I think there's just a ton of value in getting that face-to-face time with leadership. And I think when things were confusing and scary, to have that space where you can actually ask questions, understand the stability of the company, get the confidence from the leadership team, I think that really made a big difference. And now we realize that our field crews may be less impacted than our office people, because they're still going to project sites every day and they still have their same relationships. So now we're scheduling the same thing before the weather gets bad, hopefully, with all of our office-based teams, and trying to, meet with each of them in groups of, 10 or less probably. But that in-person connection, I think, is something we're really struggling with. And how do we have those sort of company events? We've tried them virtually, and I think there's some value, and I think we're getting better at it, but we're trying to find ways to learn how to better facilitate large virtual, webinars, basically, for that connection point. and I think one of the big culture things we've always struggled with, and I imagine other people do, and it's the field office divide, we call it. Like, people who work in the office are segregated from people in the field, and the office was the only place, and these in-person meetings was the only times that you had pollination across the field crews and the office crews, where you could build relationships and tell stories, or learn about the business, learn about perspectives. And so we haven't figured out how to recreate that office field connection. And I think that's one of the next things for us to work on. But a lot of the other Gear Up stuff I've been hearing seems, right on point, and it seems very similar to things we're trying to do in our business.
Jason, this is Jeff Siegel. Deborah, if I could jump in real quick. A couple things.
Please do.
A couple things. One, if we'd be happy to be a resource for you as you're trying to figure out how to conduct these larger meetings. We do a lot of them, both webinar format as well as just large meetings with natural breakouts and how that goes. So reach out to Kate or I'm happy to be a resource for you. What's remarkable about what you've described, and Jeff and Leland, you guys have described as well, is you've naturally started to challenge the underlying mindsets, which are biases, assumptions. These are things that we come into that every day with, and challenging those individual mindsets is one of the most important things to do as you look at how do you deal with the challenges ahead. And then from there, and Jason, you did a really nice job in saying, okay, what are the group dynamics that we need to shift? Because we used to meet in person, which is a certain type of group dynamic. And so how do we shift those group dynamics to make sure we're still attending to our culture while also dealing with how do we meet in a socially distanced environment? So all three of you have done a really nice job intuitively in leading your organizations.
Thank you, Bruce. But to both of you, the other thought piece that I read, which I think this is so helpful, is you say that COVID-19 was a beta test. Can you talk about, one of you talk about what you mean by that?
Okay, Kate, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that this was the way that we're thinking about beta test was that because this was so sudden and new, and there was not like a let's pilot what it's like to all meet virtually and redo everything that we've ever done and figure out new ways of doing things, that now that we've been through that we've been able to, we can learn from that. And so we're describing that as just a new way of looking at COVID, as opposed to, I think a lot of stuff we talk about too is like, are things happening to us or are they happening for us? And so this is another mindset shift could be around like, well, this is happening for us, and how can we rise to the challenge, which I think everybody on this call certainly has been exceptionally well rising to the challenge. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of social scientists in our organization, and we have a social science background. And if you look at the way society has been evolving, things are becoming more virtual, things are becoming, how do you work remotely in this new virtual world? How do you connect? How do you maintain culture? How do you build culture? How do you build relationships? And so COVID has basically supercharged the evolution into more virtual activity. So this beta test, it's effectively a forced pilot, as Kate had said, or a beta test of how do we as humans, how do we as leaders, and how do we as organizations adapt to some changes that are inevitable. And in this case, they've just been consolidated in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I want to jump in
true.
on that. Jump in on that.
Go, Paul.
I can tell you that I really see what you're saying there, because it really has, in a lot of ways, and in a number of different areas, forced our hands to look at things differently. Those that might not have been so tech savvy in February, I guarantee you, they know what they're doing now, and I can tell you that I think people were up for the challenge. I think that people have embraced the fact that this is the way that, communications have to go right now. And I think we've all learned a lot from it, when it comes to efficiency and communications and being able to connect. This isn't just a connection for us. This is how people are connecting to their own families. These are people that are connecting now all across the world, because they can't travel or they're worried about this, that, and the other. So it's really changed a lot of foundational things that was a norm, say, in February. Now I feel weird if I don't have a mask. You know what I mean? And that's weird, and so there's really been some great things that have come out of this, and we have to take a look and make the best with the hand we've been dealt. And so there are some things that have forced us to learn and be better at. There's definitely the areas of disconnect for sure. But that's kind of, I just want to jump into that our hand was forced. This was a forced beta, if you will, but I think there are some positives out of it to say, things that maybe were a strategic plan once are now full on in play, because of the adjustments that we've had to make to navigate through all of this. So I just wanted to reinforce that a little bit, Bruce.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, I'd like to hear from DJ from ABB, because you are a large global company. And so the things we're discussing this morning, are you affected any differently? Is it just on a bigger scale? Would love to hear from you about some of the things that you're experiencing and feeling.
We did get affected by this quite a bit. ABB put the entire company on stay at home for North America and in Europe. So people had to adjust, learn how to work from home. Our resources were focused on getting everybody what they need to be able to do their jobs at home. And it's been difficult, particularly from a standpoint, from my position with sales. I'm so used to being in front of customers and interacting socially with them that to do this over the phone and emails and Zooms and Skypes and all the other tools that we have has really kind of pushed my limits on what I'm able to do.
Yeah, that's challenging. John from Milwaukee, your company is in a similar situation. Tell us a little bit about your environment and how your organization and you are trying to adapt to move in and toward what's going to be the new way of doing business.
Yeah, so it's definitely been a challenge. One of the things that's been part of our culture before this was a focus on agility, that as we've grown, things have changed very rapidly. So adapting has really been kind of our norm for a very long time. So that's been kind of a natural extension for us, but it's been much more difficult to stay in front of customers. There's a lot that aren't allowing in-person meetings, no matter how small. So it's been important to adapt to their needs and really be in contact more than ever to keep things moving forward. And then, of course, finding creative ways to meet as well if they can't meet in the office. Maybe finding a way to meet off-site. And of course, the video calls have been a great change. Before COVID, we would do Skype calls and you couldn't see the other person, and it'd be difficult to have a productive meeting. And now that everyone's comfortable having a camera on, it feels a lot more natural. If there's a pause, it's easy to see if they're paying attention, taking notes, or maybe unhappy or not paying attention.
Thank you, John. Bryan Beckett, you serve the industry not in a hands-on electrical contracting way, but through a very important means of marketing and communication. And can you say anything about today's topic and what the implications are for you?
A lot of my stuff is done virtually because of on a national scale, but obviously since traveling is pretty much cut out for a while, that's kind of how we shifted. And it's so interesting to see people shifting their branding and marketing to throwing their logo on PPE products. I never thought I'd be pushing masks and sanitizer and different things with people's logo on it. But yeah, so our shift has been doing a lot of video calls, strategy on a virtual platform rather than the in-person and expos and trade show type atmosphere. So it's been quite a shift that just came out of nowhere, but challenge accepted.
Okay, David Jones, again, any thoughts, any wisdom to share, any questions for Bruce or Kate?
God bless you for saying wisdom, but I don't know about that. The thing that sticks out for me is the challenges of navigating the different viewpoints. I mean, we're all talking about how you're doing virtual meetings, but yet there are some contractors, how you interact with Jeff Magee, for example, and how I interact with Leland are two different scenarios. One may be very stringent on COVID measures and procedures, and the other one isn't. And to DJ's point about no travel, there's a situation where I am actually going to travel because it's a big deal. I'm not, overly over the moon about it, but I'm going to do it. And it's a situation where ABB is got the position that they're on a no travel, and their competitor is going on a meeting. So trying to make sure that you're doing it right, and then also reading what your contractors and customers are expecting of you. So I think in some cases I have contractors that it's important that I go see them. There are others that not going to happen. So that's the hard part. That's the challenge, is to make sure that you, one, you can read your customer right, and then two, do it the right way. Even if they say, COVID's over, come on in. Is that really what you want to do?
Right. Well, and there was some wisdom in that, and I think very much important points made. So thank you, David. I know this is just a tough thing to wrestle with. Marilyn, I think you wanted to ask Bruce a question.
I did, and in fact, I was going to say, David Jones, your wisdom you carry with you every day, and that is your ability to communicate and read people. You do that very well, and that's I don't know whether that's a skill or if that is an innate ability, but you do that really well.
Thank you.
So you have been an important partner of ours throughout all of this because of those deep connections that you have in understanding the marketplace. My question, Bruce, I wanted to ask, now that you've had an opportunity, you and Kate both, to hear a little bit from our contractors in the context of what you're seeing with COVID. You work with a lot of global, large corporate clients. I'm wondering, based on the conversations that we've heard, what are you also seeing from clients? What are you seeing in terms of change with others that might be, what do we not know that we need to know from the global connections that you have?
Yeah. So the firms we work with are varying size. They're some of them are small, advanced manufacturing organizations. Some of them are, as Marilyn said, very large, global, very distributed workforce. And one of the things that I think it was Jason said, there's this divide between office resources and field resources. One of our clients, one of the largest real estate development companies, who does both land development, housing development, as well as mixed use development, they're struggling with how do they deal differently with sales force that need to be on site, with field force that need to build, and office staff that need to potentially be co-located to get their jobs done. So this idea of how do you intentionally figure out how your work is going to evolve, and how do the different constituents work evolve differently. We look at what are the individual mindsets, group dynamics, and organizational factors that need to be thought through differently for the different constituents is probably more important now than ever, because this idea of sense of belonging and culture are so important to the well-being and the health of the employee population, as well as the well-being and health of the organization. So really what we're seeing is leadership teams of organizations of all sizes being very deliberate around what's their ambition for the organization, and what are the behavioral commitments that the leadership team needs to align to make sure that they're bringing this ambition to life. It's even more important now with the stresses of COVID than it was before, and it was a requirement before.
Thank you, Bruce. Anybody else have a question or a comment they'd like to make before we wrap up?
My only one other thought, Micah is still on the call. Micah, is there anything else that is a top of mind for you based on the conversation and the feelings that you heard from our members today?
I think that and I completely agree with all of the statements that have been made. We're at the point, there was a point last week between the 101 degree heat, the ash and smoke and the snow, that I wondered when the frogs and locusts were coming and didn't know which one was next. And I think a lot of people probably felt that. We're seeing, and we also got to remember, school's now back, and it's not back for a lot of people in the way that they expect. So while summer might have been somewhat of a reprieve in terms of this is normal, remember that a lot of your force is now having screaming fifth graders. There's 30 fifth graders on a computer downstairs in my house right now, because I live with a teacher, and I can tell you that the stress is on both sides of that screen. So we've seen an uptick in employee kind of relations complaints, kind of HR issues that have arisen lately. And I think that is only going to continue as we get deeper into the school year, we get deeper into the fall, where I would anticipate there's probably another bump in cases. So communication is the key, and it's harder now because we're through a screen. And if you've ever heard any of my presentations, or probably Kristen's, we always harp on communicating is a lost art. And it's harder now, but you have to continue to do it. Checking in is big. Checking in with people. I mean, even when you don't think you have to, I think that keeps the open door open and reminds them that they have the open door to talk. And it also alerts you to any issues. It's not a lot of your employees, you might not hear everything you used to through the grapevine, because the grapevine's a little bit more electronic. So communicating kind of opens that door too. So I agree with all that, and remind employers that everyone's going through a little bit right now, and communicating with them is easier than letting the issues arise behind closed doors.
I really like what you said about proactively reaching out, even just to ask the question, how are you doing? That can open the door for, more of a discussion about what's really going on, and it's critical to stay on top of that. Bruce, Kate, any other parting comments you want to make?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Micah just shared around communication and the importance of being able to create the space for quality conversations. And whether or not we're in person or virtual, we all have agency to do that. And quality conversation isn't necessarily, roses and ponies. It's also like, what's reality, and where are we today? And so I appreciate, Micah, what you're saying about over communicate and be overly transparent, even if it feels like it's too much. That's going to be more important than ever, certainly. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Marilyn, would you like to wrap us up?
Well, Bruce, Kate, and Micah, I knew that today's conversation was going to be as deep and rich as it was. We really appreciate all of your perspective. For everybody on the call, you know that we have had Fisher and Phillips on every week since we've been doing this middle to late March, and we're going to continue to do so moving forward. We aren't weekly anymore. Our next meeting is at the end of September. We have brought in a safety topic, working with the safety forum. So we will be, our next member forum will be focused around safety. And then in October, we are going to be working with Leland and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to do a topic around workforce development and equity and inclusion, and are going to be focused on that in the middle of October. So thanks everybody again for a great forum. Really appreciate it. And Bruce and Kate, again, thank you for stepping in to be a partner with us and for all the work that you've helped us do strategically over the last few years.
Happy to help.
And thank you especially to our contractors, Jeff, Leland, Jason, and DJ, David, thank you for your input. It was really helpful to hear from you today. And I think, if nothing else, we realize we are not alone.
Yeah, that's the big one for me.
Oh.
I know I'm not the only one having crazy Mondays. Awesome.
So,
can I ask one last question to the experts? And that's, Micah, you were talking about communication, and I know on our team, we are just slammed with the number of phone calls and specifically emails. To try and respond to every one of them is a really big challenge for our people to get back to it. One of my thoughts was to put an automatic reply on the email that said, "I got your email, I'll get back to you as soon as possible." So the question is there any communication that's not good communication? Am I missing something by suggesting something that along that line? At least the person that sent the email has a sense that the person on the other end is responding, because that's a big issue, not getting back in a timely manner.
And that's the biggest. As long as you get back to them, that's fine. I tell employers the easiest way to lose employees and to lose that communication is to tell someone you're going to get back to them and then forget. And that's easy. I mean, that's easy to do for me. That's easy to do for almost anybody. As long as you're getting back to them, as long as you prioritize that, I think it's fine. Another way that we've, I guess, somewhat advised employers is you're going to get the same question 30 times. Sometimes having Monday morning calls or Tuesday morning, hey, let's go over, here's 5 questions that we've come across from everybody, and answer them, boom, boom, boom. That will kind of slow that pipeline of questions coming in. But I will tell you that the fact that you are having an overabundance of questions is better than the opposite.
Yeah, Micah, I totally would agree. David, what Mike is talking about is there's a detrimental pattern to point-to-point communications, because if you're just going one-to-one, then the telephone game of how's that translated to the next person that person then talks to. And Micah was right. If one person's got the question, most likely at least 10% of your staff, if not more, has the same question. And so you might as well make it more efficient. And the automatic reply is perfectly fine. You might want to put in there, we'll address these on a regular basis at a Monday morning meeting or in a regular email out to everyone. But I think that's a great tool.
One of the things I was going to say, and
Thank you.
I know we're way past time, but if you need to drop off, drop off. But one of the things I was going to say, Kate, I'm glad at the very beginning of the call you mentioned you've got kids at home. You know, you have these multiple competing priorities going on, and the same is true in any workplace that has children right now. And in our case, we have employees who have children in school, and the way that school started is already different than the way school is right now. The schools are even changing and making modifications, which, you know, anybody that has children knows that the first few weeks of normal school. You're moving to a new grade, you're moving to a new teacher, you're getting adjusted to new processes and protocols and supporting a young person in that realm. And it's a realm we all understood because we had that same structure. This is completely different. And now we've got kids shifting in different ways. You know, they get used to this week's routine and then next week's routine is changing. So I have pulled our team together, the parents that have children in school, and we're checking in with each other as a group every other week to sort of share strategies and share what that means for the workplace in the short term. You know, we can't make a decision as an employer today on how we're going to address the school year. We just kind of need to get through the next week to 10 days. And so we're doing these regular check-ins with us as a group, and everyone knows that if they are not comfortable saying something or have something else they want to talk about, they know to come to me directly in a confidential conversation. But just sharing some strategies among parents has made people go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I could do that. And at the end of the day, you know, we're all still businesses. We all still have products to produce. We all have things to sell. We all have services to provide. And just taking a little bit of time with our employees to do that, hopefully is also continuing to make us effective as an organization. So I just wanted to share, I'm glad that you and Micah both brought that up, because I can also tell you the stress on parents right now is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I will say, as a communicator in a profession for communication, I believe that your employees, your people are your most precious asset. And it is well worth every minute of time you can invest in them. So with that, if no one has anything else, there's some links in the chat about the NECA inspectors meeting at 11:30 today, and also an IECRM NECA Zoom link. Is this the one for today, Paul?
Yeah, it's at 11:30 today. We run a monthly meeting with all of the larger authorities and jurisdictions, you know, when it comes to code enforcement. And just wanted to invite anybody that's interested in joining that today, to get some of your code questions or interpretation put forward towards the professional and the inspector, so you can get a consistent answer.
Great.
Okay.
Apologies for going
Thank you
over,
all.
but appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck to Brenda getting Jeff through the 12th grade. See ya, buddy.
Oh my God, David always
Thank you, everybody.
comic relief.
We weren't going to end the call without some humor.
No, couldn't let it happen. We'll see you.
Great hat.
Through that.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
That's awesome. Thank you all. Thanks, Kate.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to send you an email, Marilyn, with some additional resources.
Fantastic. And I'm looking forward to a follow-up with you and Bruce as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nicole, I'm gonna drop you out.
And is 228, that's you, isn't it, Deb?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Awesome.
And we have stopped
Recording.